Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Hello, I'm Alastair Stewart, and I'd invite you to join me at noon on Saturdays and Sundays for Alastair Stewart and Friends. I've been in this business for over 40 years. Now, here at GB News, I've never been happier. I get to choose the big stories that really interest me. We hear what you have to say, and you hear what I have to say. I really hope you can join me, noon on Saturdays and Sundays.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
It's never a dull day in politics, is it? Today we're exploring some of those biggest issues. Still, migration in the Channel, but also another bit of migration. The Health Secretary flying off to Australia. I should say the former Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, of course. He's joining the jungle. We'll explore that. We'll explore the other big issues, the upcoming fiscal statement and Britain's tumbling fertility rate. All that to come after the headlines.
A very good morning to you. 9:32. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date on GB News. There could be thousands of police officers serving in English and Welsh forces who should have failed vetting checks. Examining 8 police forces, the police watchdog found officers who'd previously been convicted of domestic abuse or who'd been accused of sexual assault. Well, the report said the process to make decisions on officers were questionable at best and found a common culture of misogyny, sexism and predatory behaviour towards female police officers. Hundreds of migrants have been moved out of the Manston Immigration Centre in Kent. The Immigration Minister, Robert Jenrick, says the number of migrants at the facility had fallen substantially yesterday, with more people expected to be moved today. The site had been significantly over capacity, with reports of dangerous conditions. The former Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, has flown to Australia to join I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. The series starts this Sunday, but Mr Hancock is expected to be one of 2 latecomers to join the camp. He resigned from Cabinet in June last year after breaching guidance on social distancing. He's had the Conservative whip suspended. The price of basic food items like tea bags, sugar and milk has risen significantly over the last month. Food inflation reached a record high of 11.6%, with the price of fresh foods rising the fastest. The British Retail Consortium says costs were pushed up due to higher costs of ingredients, energy and worker shortages. The King and the Queen Consort will host a Buckingham Palace reception to celebrate the achievements of over 200 Olympic and Paralympic medalists. Well, the event this evening will see sporting stars who won gold, silver and bronze at Tokyo 2020 and the Beijing 2022 Winter Games. You're up to date. We're on your TV, online and DAB+ radio. It's GB News. Now let's go over to Tom for the briefing.
Good morning, it's 9:33 and this is The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, on your TV and your radio. Now, Rishi Sunak insisted yesterday that the UK will always be a compassionate, welcoming country, despite the word invasion being used by his Home Secretary in the Commons, of course. The Prime Minister said that this comment, made by Suella Braverman after she fought that backlash on Monday as she was accused of breaking the law over the government's treatment of Channel migrants. Well, let's discuss all of this in greater detail. Ben Glaze, the Deputy Political Editor of The Mirror, joins me live in the studio. And Ben, is this a row that Suella Braverman wanted to have? We were talking a lot about migration yesterday and potentially not so much about the handling of sensitive documents.
That's right, it's the dead cat strategy, really. I don't think it was an accident that in the Commons on Monday night she used that very inflammatory word invasion to describe asylum seekers, Channel migrants arriving on British shores. She knew what she was doing, and it provoked the furor that she would have anticipated. Now, because she's come from the hard right of the Conservative Party, and because she resigned only a few days, was reappointed only a few days after resigning, Rishi Sunak sort of gone out of his way to welcome her back into the fold, into Cabinet, sort of show that hard right Conservative Party, that he is willing to have a broad church and take people from all sides of the parliamentary party. Because she's got that position, maybe she's throwing her weight around. And yes, it did deliberately overshadow that big row about the security breaches with her forwarding emails to her personal email address.
And yet the Labour Party has been trying to show that this shows a weakened Prime Minister, that Rishi Sunak had to do some sort of deal with Suella Braverman in order to become Prime Minister in the first place. Is that an attack that's sticking? Has the melee around the Home Secretary bled through into how the public, or indeed politicians, are looking at the Prime Minister right now?
I don't think it's resonating so much with the public. I mean, it is true that when Suella Braverman endorsed Rishi Sunak, surprisingly, on the Sunday afternoon, it sort of killed off Boris Johnson's last remaining hopes of coming back as Tory leader and, of course, as Prime Minister. So Rishi offering her that job was sort of payback for that, and demonstrated that he was willing to accept people in a way that Liz Truss wasn't, who weren't his supporters in his original leadership campaign. But I'm not sure the public, it does resonate with them, because all they see is the migrants turning up on the shores of Kent, and they want someone to get a grip of it. Those internal party politics rows dominated the Conservative Party over the summer and before that, but they do seem to have dissipated slightly with Rishi Sunak entering number 10 last week.
And it's interesting looking at the arguments over the summer, the leadership election arguments that focused so much on the burden of tax that this country faces, the 70-year high tax burden. One of the reasons, perhaps the main reason, why Liz Truss won against the former Chancellor. And yet now, this week, we're learning that that tax burden might rise higher still, not only with increased taxes coming on the 17th of this month, but also spending cuts.
That's right. It is going to be austerity 2.0 on November 17th. Tax rises and spending cuts, because there's a black hole of at least £35 billion in the public finances, which was exacerbated by that fiscal plan put forward by Liz Truss during her doomed premiership with her best friend as Chancellor, Kwasi Kwarteng. So Chancellor Jeremy Hunt and Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, they're going to make this statement on November 17th. And I think all of us are braced for yet more spending cuts and higher taxation.
And there's this odd consensus between the Labour Party leadership and the Conservative Party leadership on this issue, that in order to fund things, these taxes will have to go up. And yet the United Kingdom is borrowing less than just about any comparable country. We've got a smaller amount of borrowing than America, than Japan, than Canada, than Italy, than France. Why then is it that we sort of uniquely have to face that situation? Is there an odd sort of political consensus that has frozen out those that might take a more boosterish attitude towards how we handle this problem?
I think we saw what happened with Kwasi Kwarteng's statement. £45 billion of unfunded tax cuts. They wanted, Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng wanted to lower the tax burden. Ideologically, they are opposed to high taxation. They wanted a low tax economy. But those tax cuts needed to be paid for. And because they announced the unfunded tax cuts, the markets took fright, and you saw what happened, and mortgage rates for hundreds of thousands of families across the United Kingdom have gone up as a result of that botched mini-budget. So if you did want to do that, well, we've already seen what happens, what the consequences are.
I suppose there's an argument that they should have pushed through some of that supply-side reform first and steadied the market's hand that way, showing how they would achieve that growth, although a lot of that supply-side reform now looks like it'll be dropped as well. But we've been talking about migration in the Channel. We've been talking about the upcoming fiscal statement. There's one bigger story that is dominating just about every single front page of every paper in front of me. There's one man who used to be in the cabinet who is now on the front page of just about every single paper this morning, and his name is Matt Hancock. Let's have a listen to what the people of Matt Hancock's own constituency in West Suffolk have to think about the former Health Secretary taking to I'm a Celebrity.
Is the country fantastic, going well, is it? No. So he's leaving his job to go to do this. And he's earning 80 grand, I think?
I think it's nearer 400.
Exactly. So what he's doing, he shouldn't be in this job.
I'm quite shocked that he's going. It could make him, or it could break him.
I'm not particularly impressed, no. When we vote for MPs, they should be here doing their work for us, and everybody, well, I can't say everybody, but a lot of people have lost faith in that for quite a long time now, so...
I don't think he should be doing it. It's not good for the public's image, to be quite honest, so, yeah, I think it's time for him to call it a day and move on to some new pastures.
Well, Matt Hancock, our former Health Secretary, who fell from grace after it was discovered he'd not been wholly adhering to those social distancing guidelines he helped design. He, of course, is not heading to the Treasury Committee, as had been mooted, but to the jungle. Yes, Matt Hancock said that his appearance on I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here will be a way to reach the politically disengaged, adding that he hopes to show the human side of MPs. Downing Street, however, said last night that MPs should be working hard in Parliament or their constituencies at such a difficult time, and have suspended the whip. But what is life like in the jungle? What is to come for our former Health Secretary? I'm delighted to be joined live in the studio, not only by Ben Glaze, but now Christopher Biggins as well, legendary actor and indeed winner of I'm a Celebrity 2007.
Yeah.
So, first of all, what can Matt Hancock expect as he, I believe, is currently flying to Australia? What's that experience going to be like for him?
Horrendous. I mean, that flight I remember vividly because you don't know what is going to happen to you. You know the programme. You know what you could be going through. First of all, I have to say I think it's a brilliant booking by I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. I mean, I think it really is. However, I think it is appalling that he's going. I mean, we are in the worst troubles ever in this country, and a politician is going to do a show called Celebrity Get Me Out of Here. I think it's ridiculous. If I was a constituent of his, I would be absolutely furious. I mean, it's wrong. He should be here doing his job, which he's paid for. And, you know, I don't know what he's getting paid. They say he's going to give it to all to charity. Well, we'll soon find out if he is. But it's wrong.
It is extraordinary that, I say, just about every single newspaper has this man's face on it this morning. I suppose this programme hasn't got this kind of media coverage in quite some time. It's quite a coup.
No, but I mean, he is a high-profile politician, you know. I mean, when I was there, the only person was a girl called Janice Dickinson, who was an American model who everyone was going wild about. But it's a great show. I mean, it really is. I mean, I loved every single moment of it, and it is life-changing. And perhaps it will change his life.
And we're all expecting that Matt Hancock will have to perform some pretty disgusting challenges.
Oh, I hope so.
Which, of course, you did too. What was the most peculiar thing you had to eat on that programme?
Well, I did have to have eat a kangaroo's penis, which I did. At the time, I said on camera I had worse things in my mouth. And then I had
What's that? Is that some sort of turtle?
No. I think that could... Oh, do you know, I don't know what that is. But I did have
it's
to have...
It's probably better not to think about it.
No, it is. But I did have to have a kangaroo's ball. And I bit into it, and all this liquid erupted in my mouth, and that went down. Then I had to chew the sac, and then 9 months later I gave birth to a Joey. So but it is extraordinary. I slept the best I've ever slept in my life. Which was extraordinary because you're out in the open. There's those terrible storms over in Australia at the moment, so he'll probably get wet, wetter than he is already. And there are, if you enter into it, it's a great experience. And he's got a great group of people. I don't know what they're going to think, though. I mean, it'd be very interesting to see their reaction to him.
And of course, he's saying that he wants to promote his dyslexia campaign.
Yes.
He sees it as a huge opportunity to speak to millions of people, more than 10 million people a night, the most watched programme when it airs. I suppose that is an opportunity for him. And some might say, let's bring Ben Glaze in now as well, because some might say that the role of an MP isn't just to trundle through those voting lobbies in Parliament. It's also to promote causes, to represent those causes. And surely there's an argument that going on the television is part of that.
He doesn't want to promote dyslexia. He wants to promote himself.
Yeah.
He's a shameless MP.
Of course.
There's a massive cost of living crisis in this country, and he's going literally halfway around the world, being paid, we're told, about 350 grand, and he hasn't said he's going to donate it all to charity. He said he's going to donate some of it to charity, to dyslexia charities and a hospice in his Suffolk constituency. But he should be in Parliament. He has a platform. You know, 650 MPs is a very privileged position. It's very difficult to get on some of those shortlists in constituencies. He got there. You know, he's been in the cabinet. He has a platform to make these cases about dyslexia and any other issues he wants to. He doesn't need to go on television to do it. This is all about... I suspect he's accepted that his frontline political career is over. You know, there's this cringing picture of Rishi Sunak when he arrived at Conservative campaign headquarters.
Ignoring him.
Yeah, and various supporters are going and hugging Rishi Sunak, and Rishi Sunak sees him and blanks him.
Yeah.
And at that point, I think Matt Hancock realises he's not got a seat at the top table. And he said that ITV had come from a couple of times over the summer and he'd rebuffed them. Well, I suspect, realising that he's not going to get a cabinet job,
he rang them.
Perhaps ITV upped their offer as well. And then he thought, you know what, I'm going to get on that plane.
Well, you are saying that he is one of the most recognisable politicians in the country, not only, of course, because of those nightly COVID press conferences done from Downing Street where we were sort of stared down the barrel of the camera and told exactly what we could or could not do, but also because of a piece of footage that Matt Hancock really would rather no one had seen, which I believe we have some access to right now, the famous pictures of Matt Hancock and Gina Coladangio in the Department for Health and Social Care, the pictures that led to his downfall 2 summers ago. And yet, have we all forgotten that this was some sort of huge security leak? That this was actually pretty profound in terms of how the security of government was secure?
I don't think the security element was the biggest part of that story. You know, there's a huge public interest in leaking that. The man who literally set the rules that the rest of us had to abide by was then caught breaking them by snogging an aide in his office, right? His taxpayer-funded office, his taxpayer-funded assistant, right? So we all needed to know about that, and rightly he resigned. We should also bear in mind that whilst he's going to Australia, and we can all take the mick out of it, he's got to eat a kangaroo's penis, right? The COVID inquiries, they're having preliminary hearings. We were talking at the Mirror to some of the families yesterday of who lost loved ones during coronavirus pandemic, and they're outraged that he's going off over there, as were his constituents you spoke to in West Suffolk. So there's a huge element here of he's just leaving it all behind. You know, the cost of living crisis, the COVID hearings, the public inquiry beginning, and he's going to be off in a camp with other celebrities, in inverted commas, eating these horrible delicacies for primetime TV.
And yet, Christopher Biggins, you are filmed all the time in this camp. You're filmed while you sleep, you are filmed while you... He's got some pretty good practice then, having had his CCTV leaked across the country.
Absolutely. I think perhaps he's gone for the sex, because that's, you know, he's obviously interested in that. And there's all those women there, you know, that are...
You're not telling me that... I'm not sure we're allowed to talk about this at this time in the morning, but no, I mean, that sort of thing doesn't go on in the camp, does it really?
Well, look, Peter Andre and Katie, they had an affair. on screen. And they don't show them actually doing it, but I believe they did do it.
Of all the things I thought we'd be talking about this morning, I'm not sure copulation in the jungle was particularly one of them.
Well, I think it's a possibility, and I know that there are. They wouldn't show it, but there are areas which you feel you're not being filmed in. You can go to, which of course you are being filmed constantly.
Gosh, I suppose for Matt Hancock, he might be looking back at some of the other parliamentarians who have been on this programme. Of course, famously in 2012, one Nadine Dorries went on this programme, and it was only 8 years later that she was back in the cabinet. So potentially, Matt Hancock can see himself. I mean, he's only a young person in politician terms, but he's got a whole career ahead of him.
But does she have a strong position in the government at the moment?
Well, she's out of the government now.
Yeah, but I mean...
She was Secretary of State for Culture for 2 years.
Well, after she came out?
After she came out.
Oh, I didn't realise that. Yeah. Oh, well, there you are. Then he'll be Prime Minister when he comes out. But I mean, I think, he's doing it for the wrong reasons, I think. Definitely. I mean, but he will be entertaining, and it'd be so interesting to see the reaction of the other... That's what I'm really looking forward to, the reaction of him going in from the other contestants.
Now, how long, Ben Glaze, do you think that Matt Hancock will last in this jungle?
I hope he stays in a long time so we can keep voting him in to do these horrible trials. I doubt he'd win it because I think he's overestimated his own popularity.
Yeah.
It's impossible to overstate the size of this man's ego. So I think he'd been there long enough for him to do some of those Bush Tucker trials. Talking to some MPs yesterday, they're planning to keep voting and voting and voting to make sure he's stuck in this coffin with snakes or whatever else they have to do.
And Christopher Biggins, your assessment, how long do you think that Matt Hancock has a chance of winning?
No. Not at all. And I think you're absolutely right. They will. The public will keep him in, and because they want to see him suffer, especially in the position that he's in. It's a very interesting experience, and I think he will gain something from it. I'm not quite sure what. But it's life-changing doing it. But, it's so wrong in this particular case that every single newspaper in front of you has put it on the front page. And that is what is wrong about the whole system. Yeah. And he should be doing more for this country than going away on a freebie.
Well, Christopher Biggins and indeed Ben Glaze, thank you so much for talking through all of those issues, and clearly the most important issue facing the country right now, as assessed by every single newspaper this morning, Matt Hancock's plans over the next couple of weeks. Well, to our final story today, are we pricing ourselves out of existence? With spiralling childcare costs and falling birth rates, not just in this country, but of course across many countries in the Western world, we might just be pricing ourselves out, not having enough children to replace the population that went before. On the weekend, there was a march called March of the Mummies, and one of the people who spoke at that march was my next guest. Joella Braley has been campaigning on these issues, on issues of childcare and motherhood for quite some time, and I'm delighted that she can join me now. Thank you for joining me on the programme this morning. Firstly, should we be concerned as a society that we simply aren't having enough children, frankly, to replace those who have gone before us?
I mean, we should, because it will impact our future economy. We need to at least maintain the birth rate so that we can actually pay money into pension pots, so that we have enough people working that are contributing to taxes. But we know that childcare costs are definitely preventing women from having children. We also know from research that we did that the number of women who've had abortions in the last 5 years is high. And of those women, 6 in 10 said the reason why they had an abortion, one of the main reasons why they had an abortion, was because of childcare costs. These are women terminating wanted pregnancies because they cannot afford childcare. I mean, that to me seems absolutely crackers, that we've created a system that is so expensive, so completely inaccessible, so dysfunctional that women are terminating wanted pregnancies.
Extraordinary situation, and there was a study in 2019 which I sometimes point to online, which explores the gap between fertility intentions and fertility outcomes. showing that women actually do want to have, on average, just over 2 children per woman. That would sort of average out as, of course, replacement. But the outcomes of fertility are much, much lower, clearly pointing to structural barriers there. Now, it's your assessment that the main one there is childcare. What can we do to make childcare more affordable?
We need to invest in it. It's as simple as that. If we look at how much the UK invests in childcare as a proportion of GDP, it's very small compared to other countries. The government often tells us that they invest a huge amount in childcare, but in comparison to other developed nations, we really don't. And so we need to invest in it so that it's affordable. And we need to ensure that childcare workers are paid properly for the really valuable job that they do. The majority of them are on minimum wage, and so they're leaving to go and work in supermarkets and McDonald's because you're valued more and paid more for flipping burgers in this country than you are for educating and caring for our youngest children. So investment is the key thing. But the way that our subsidies work in childcare, it means that when you have finished parental leave and you're looking at returning to work, childcare at that point is at its most expensive because there are no subsidies for children who are the age of 1 year old, 2 years old, unless you're on certain benefits like universal credit. And so what happens is it's usually mothers that take 9 months maternity leave. They look at their salary compared to childcare costs, and it just doesn't add up. It doesn't make sense. And so they decide to either fall out of the workforce at that point, or they decide to work part-time or flexibly so that they can afford, they are relying on childcare less than they would do otherwise, and therefore reducing their costs. But either way, that means they're reducing their earnings and we are losing them from the economy. So what we need to do is move those subsidies over so that they start from the time that parental leave ends. And we need to fund those subsidies properly, because the way that they are funded by the government means they're underfunded by about £3 per child per hour, and those costs are being passed down the chain. So that's why we're seeing these inflated costs for younger children. So we need to subsidise it properly, we need to do it from 9 months, and we need to make it about no more than 5% of household income so that it is affordable for families.
It is really important that we emphasise just the problem that we're seeing in society right now. We've got a graph from the ONS which shows the birth rate as it has been tumbling. Now, of course, 2 would be replacement, and we did touch that briefly, and I think it was 2007, but it's been tumbling back down ever since. And it's really profound because the way that we fund social services in this country, the way that we fund pensions, the NHS, everything else comes from general taxation. There aren't pots that are saved up. If we've got more old people and fewer young people, the entire social structures of this country sadly collapse. Just a final word to you in terms of how politicians should be focusing on this issue, in a sentence, if you would.
Well, they need to not only fund childcare properly, they also need to look at parental leave, because we pay £156 a week and it's not affordable to live on. So families are starting life in poverty. And we also need to look at flexible working legislation so that people can effectively manage their professional obligations and their personal obligations. If they look at all 3 of those things, the birth rate will increase, I guarantee it.
Well, Joella Brealey, founder of Pregnant Then Screwed, thank you very much for joining us here on The Briefing this morning. Really important topic there. And thank you for joining us as well and listening through all of these important stories. Some might say more important than others. But join me for the next 2 hours as we dive deeper into all of the stories affecting this country and indeed beyond. I'll be presenting To The Point from now until midday. That's after this.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.